Welcome to Canon Conversation. Yesterday we talked about advice to singles, and so now we're going to talk advice to married people. The main thing to understand when you're married, God is big on roles. 1 Corinthians 11 says that the head of the woman is the man, the head of the man is Christ, and the head of Christ is God. And so it's very important. And of course, we know Christ. He'll always do. He says in the book of John, I always say and do what my Father tells me to say and do. Why? I mean, he is God too, God the Son. Can he do stuff on his own? Well, because he's subject to the Father. That's the role that he's in. It's not, being the Son isn't any worse than being the Father. It's just he's in the role of being the Son. So that's the role he fills. You know, when I'm at work, I'm a mid-level manager. There are people under me. There are people over me. I'm not better than the people under me, and the people over me aren't better than I am. It's just I've got a role of being over the people under me, and the people over me got a role of being over me. You just have different work that you do. You know, there are certain decisions as a manager that I can make that the people under me can't. And there are certain decisions that the people above me can make that I can't. It doesn't mean they're better or I'm better than the people under me. It's just that my role is where it is. And so God says that the man is the head of the woman. Doesn't mean that the man is better than the woman. Doesn't mean that he's smarter. It's just, it's a different role. When you've got two people, Genesis 2, when God made marriage, it says the two shall be one flesh. And so when you've got one flesh, but two people, you got to have somebody who's in charge. And God puts the man in charge of the woman. At the same time that he says that the man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, and the two shall be one flesh. So you see that it's not like the woman is powerless. I mean, the man leaves his family unit and he starts a new family unit with his wife. And that also becomes important for the woman. The reason she is under the curse, the reason she is cursed with being a servant of the man is, number one, the man was made first and then the woman. And number two, the man was the woman was deceived in the sin of eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The man was not deceived. Deception is a big thing to God. The people who get the hottest place in hell aren't the murderers and the rapists. It's the people who lead others astray. They know what they're saying is wrong and they say it anyway, to deceive others. That's the worst punishment. Because people think they're doing good when they're not. So the problem with the woman is she's easily deceived. It doesn't mean she's stupid, it's just she has a different role. She's more trusting, which is important because the man isn't going to be perfect. And so she has to have the will or make the decision to stick with her man regardless of what he says or does. That's the greatest secret to a long marriage. People will ask, someone says, oh, married 60 years. Oh, wow. What's your secret? And I've never heard anybody give the correct answer. The secret to being married a long time is that the man and the woman are both committed to be married to each other for the rest of their lives. It doesn't matter what the other person does or says. No matter how bad they hurt me, I will stay with that person because I have made a lifetime commitment to that person. What that does is it builds up a great amount of trust. Because if your love is conditional, if you're going to stay with the other person as long as times are good, but not when times are bad, or when I feel like we've fallen out of love, then I'll leave. Then the trust issue is gone. Because now I've got to be deceptive and making you think that everything is fine when it's not going to be fine 100% of the time. But if we both have the commitment to stay with each other for the rest of our lives, then we can be completely honest with each other. And you may say or do something that breaks my heart, but I will still stay with you. And so that means that I can be completely and totally honest with my partner. So that is the biggest advice that I can give to married couples. And in fact, it's not me. I mean, all I'm trying to do is tell you what God's word says. And that is, God says, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. And that man can be either the wife or the husband of the marriage, primarily. There can be other people outside that try to break up a marriage, but ultimately, the husband and the wife are the two people in charge of the marriage. And if they are committed to each other to stay together, they will stay together no matter what. They're willing to go through the hard times and the good times. So that's my advice for married couples is you just stay together your entire lives. That shows, especially nowadays, because you don't see that often. People, they get married on a whim and they get divorced on a whim. It's just all based on feelings and emotions. They don't stick together. And so what you're doing is you're showing that what God has joined together, we're not going to put asunder. We're saying that we're putting God first in our relationship, that we have made the commitment to each other to stay with each other for the rest of our lives. You know, when you get up there and you say your vows, you say, till death do us part. You don't say, till both of us think it's not a good idea anymore. You know, you're there for life. And so just stay together no matter what happens. And especially when times are bad. Because then people, as Christians, unbelievers look at Christians and they see how they live their lives. A lot of times they're looking for reasons not to be a Christian. They say, oh, they're a bunch of hypocrites. They don't practice what they preach. And so then they don't, then that way they've got an excuse for not believing. But if they see that you stick together, not just through the good times, but the bad times, when all the unbelievers would have gotten a divorce by now and you're still together, that shows that, it shows that commitment, and it's a great witness to others. The greatest way to be an ambassador for Christ when you're married is to stay married. And especially when times are bad and hard, you do that. And it's going to be bad. As Paul says, such shall have trouble in the flesh. Things are not going to be perfect because men and women think differently. And no matter how much you've got sound doctrine in the inner man, you are going to at times operate in your sin nature and in your flesh. And so that's the most important thing, is to stick together. And then the second most important is you do what God says. The wife submits unto the husband, and the husband loves the wife. I've said that over and over in this series on marriage and sex, because that's what God says. And you may say, the wife may say, yeah, but my husband doesn't love me. It doesn't matter if he loves you or not. Your role is to submit unto your husband. And a husband may say, well, I don't want to love my wife because she won't submit unto me. It doesn't matter if she submits unto you. You are to love your wife. It's not conditional upon the other person doing their part. You do your part. And a lot of times when you do your part, then the other person will take advantage of you. Because if the husband loves the wife, then the wife will try to take control over the husband. And if the wife submits it to the husband, then the husband won't love the wife. A lot of times that happens. So then you try to get your own way. Forget about your own way. You're not your own. 1 Corinthians 7 says that when you get married, your body, the wife's body belongs to the husband. And the husband's body belongs to the wife. You become one flesh now. So you don't have a choice. If you want to serve God in your marriage, if you're a wife, you submit unto your husband. And if you're a husband, you love your wife. It doesn't matter what the other person does, because your head is Christ. You're serving Christ as a member of the body of Christ. And so even if the other person isn't doing what they're supposed to do, you do what you're supposed to do. Paul says in Ephesians 6, he says about servants, serve your master as unto the Lord. You may say, well, my master doesn't deserve for me to serve him correctly. He robs, he cheats, he steals, he does all these bad things. He doesn't treat me right, doesn't pay me well, and all this, he belittles me. I got all these complaints about your boss. It doesn't matter. You pretend that boss is the Lord, and you serve that boss like you would the Lord. Unconditional obedience, basically. And that's what the wife is to do with the husband, and the husband is to do with the wife. It used to be, you'd say, well, the wife would say, but he physically abuses me. It doesn't matter. You've made a lifelong commitment to him, and if he's abusing you, he's really abusing himself, because the two have become one flesh. If he's hurting you, he's hurting himself too. Happy wife, happy life is what they say. My problem is I can never figure out how to make my wife happy. So, but now the tables are turned in most relationships. The woman controls the marriage, and then the husband is beat down verbally every single day by the wife. It doesn't matter. The husband is still supposed to love the wife, even though she is not fulfilling her role of submitting to the husband. So that's the second thing to do for married couples. The third thing for advice for married people is 1 Timothy 2:15 talks about how the woman, remember, under the curse and subject to the husband. She's supposed to do whatever the husband. Her job isn't to try to control the husband. Even in 1 Peter 3, it says that a wife who is a believer, married to an unbelieving husband, it says that she is to submit to her unbelieving husband. That without the word, that he will behold her chaste conversation. And without the word, conversation doesn't mean talking, it means lifestyle in that old King James English. And so he will behold how she is letting Christ live in her. And that's how he is to be won to Christ. Not by her constantly nagging and berating him and trying to get him to be saved. So and so you think, well, that's not fair. It's not about what's fair. Love isn't fair. Love is patient, love is kind, does not envy, does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs, it doesn't delight in evil, but rejoices in the truth, it believes all things, bears all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And because of that, it never fails. So, the husband loves the wife, and the wife submits unto the husband as unto the Lord, because that is what God says that they are to do. Case closed. Doesn't matter what the other person is doing. Don't try to use the other person's sin as justification for you sinning. Two wrongs do not make a right. You do what God told you to do, regardless of what the other person does. And of course, that puts the woman in a precarious situation, submitting unto her husband, who may be doing all kinds of bad things. But that's where 1 Timothy 2:15 comes in and says that the woman is safe from the curse in childbearing if the children continue in faith and sobriety. So the bad news is she's got to submit to her husband. The good news is she's in charge of raising the kids. And that's why, the reason she is to submit to her husband, well, we see because Adam was first formed, but the second reason is because she's easily deceived, or I should say more easily deceived by lies of Satan than the man is. But the reason for that is because now she is a much better raiser of the children. Because as we said before, the woman has an emotional mind, the man has a rational, logical mind. And the kids, when they're little like that especially, need emotional support. Their brains aren't fully developed. And the most important part of the brain to develop, that needs to be developed first, is the emotional. To be able to cope with whatever's going on, the problems of life. The adult husband has a son that skins his knee playing basketball. He doesn't think anything of it. No big deal right there. What's the big deal? The husband says, I got so many more problems than a skint knee. This isn't even worth mentioning. that, okay, maybe I'll clean it because I don't want it to get infected. So maybe I'll clean and wash it, and then maybe I'll dry it and put a Band-Aid on it. Maybe I'll put Neosporin on it, maybe. And then that's it. And so there's no reason to cry over this thing. It's insignificant compared to all my other problems. So a big skit knee, it'll heal in a few days, no big deal. I don't even really have to do anything to it probably, and it's still heal in the same amount of time. So if I just stop the bleeding, that's all I need to do. You know, big deal. No big deal there. Because that's the rational, logical way of thinking of it. But the woman uses the emotional mind and says, well, yeah, I know it's not a big deal, but to my 5-year-old son, this is a huge deal. This is a big thing in his life. His brain isn't developed like my brain is. And so I know it's no big deal, but I'm going to treat it like it's the end of the world because he's treating it like it's the end of the world. And so she provides the emotional support that her children need. So that when they've got a problem, even though dad may be able to have the best logical, rational answer, the kid is looking for the emotional support, not the rational support. And so the kids go to mom. That's why Mother's Day is much more celebrated than Father's Day. That's why when there's a divorce and somebody gets custody of the kids, 95 times out of 100, the custody goes to the woman. You hear about people being a single mother. You rarely hear about a single father, because the father will just be driven crazy by the kids, because his mind isn't emotional. So all the emotional drama that the kids go through, especially a teenage daughter, man can't take it. Why do you think a man goes out? I remember we had a couple living next to us, and they had a baby. They're a young couple. They had their first child. Boy, I never seen that guy mow that grass so much after that. I thought, he just mowed the grass yesterday. What's he doing mowing it today? Well, what he's doing is he's getting away from the crying kid. He can't handle it. And so, God's made the mind of the woman to where she's more easily deceived by the devil, but she's the one who can raise the kids, whereas the men, they can't handle it. And so you look at Timothy. The faith of his mother and his grandmother is what brought Timothy up. For me, my mom, my dad, not a believer. And then, of course, my mom's mother as well. Now, my mom's father was a believer, but my mom's mother was the one who was really into church and going to church, and her husband went along with it because he was also a believer. But you look to, when you think of faith in your family, usually, there's always exceptions, but usually you're thinking of mom, you're not thinking of dad. And that is, she is the emotional rock that the children need growing up. So the third thing about marriage, the advice is have kids and make sure the wife has the time to raise the children up in a godly manner. A lot of times in this world, you've got both the husband and the wife working jobs outside of the home. And then it's up to the school or child care provider to raise the kids. The most important thing you can do when you have children is raise them in the way of the Lord. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And the way he should go is Jesus, because Jesus is the way. He is the only way to the Father. And so you do whatever you need to do to make sure your wife does not have to work outside the home, so she can devote her entire time to the kids, raising the kids. You go move out in the country, you get rid of the cable, or you get rid of big expenses, and somehow the husband starts working overtime or gets a better paying job even though he doesn't like it. You work it out somehow to where the mother can stay at home and raise the kids. And I'm talking about schooling them. You do not want to send your kids to public school or religious schools for that matter. So work it out to where the wife stays home with the kids, raises them. Now the government, who knows what they'll do as far as letting you school them at home. Well, if they don't let you, find a state or find a country that will let you raise your own kids at home. That's the most important thing, that the mother be there to raise the child in the way of the Lord, because this world isn't going to do it. So, and you need to spend time with your kids. They're going to fall away if you don't spend time. Even if you don't do it right, you don't know right division, or even if you're not a believer, just the fact that you spend time with your kids all the time. You show them how much you love them. That's the most important thing that a wife can do, and that reverses the curse of being subject unto the husband, because she's raising the next generation. And the other thing is, be faithful to your vow. And we started this series because the question is, what do you do with pornography in marriage? Well, what you do is you go to the Lord, you go to God's Word, and you recognize your vow that you've made to your spouse. And even though your spouse may not be doing what she's supposed to be doing to satisfy you, you still honor that role and serve the Lord by staying away from the pornography or the sexual sin, and only being with your wife. And again, I'm not saying that's easy in a world like today, but it's doable. I mean, I was married 11 years. I never looked at pornography, did anything like that, because I made a vow to my wife. So I'm going to be with her and not with anybody else. And so that's just the commitment that the husband should make. It's a lot harder nowadays. The wife thinks it's gross and doesn't understand what he's doing. Well, his sex drive is stronger than yours, and it's satisfied a different way than yours is. So that's why men gravitate toward pornography and women gravitate toward romantic movies. But staying away from that stuff will enhance your marriage and make your commitment unto the Lord and to your spouse, and fulfilling the role you're supposed to fulfill. So, advice to married people: if you're a wife, submit to your husband. If you're a husband, love your wife. Stay faithful to your spouse. Have kids and raise them up in a godly manner, especially the mother staying at home raising the kids. That's pretty much it. And just be committed to the other person for the rest of your life, and then that will build up trust. If you know the person will stick with you no matter what, you can tell them anything and it's okay, and it'll still be fine. Thanks for watching.